In major news from the United States, the Biden administration has banned funding for the Wuhan Institute of Virology in order to, and I quote, mitigate any public health risk, or that they say has likely violated protocols of the National Institutes of Health regarding biosafety. This is according to an official mentioned in the memo quoted by the New York Times, and they say the ban would mitigate any public health risk. We have detailed extensively the highly aggressive gain-of-function research that takes any virus, but in this instance, coronaviruses, and makes them able to infect humans when they might never have been able to before. They make them more transmissible and more virulent. As far back as May 2020, more than 3 years ago, in the Daily Telegraph, we reported that if this virus came from a Wuhan laboratory, we need to have this debate about whether gain-of-function research is worth the risk. Well, finally, the White House has said that, at least in Wuhan, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, well, it's not worth the risk. Joining me now to discuss this and other topics is James Paterson, Liberal Senator and Shadow Minister for Home Affairs and Cyber Security. Great to see you, James. Is this a significant move for the Biden administration to be saying that the Wuhan Institute of Virology poses a public health risk?
Well, thank you for having me, Shari. And yes, it is a significant move. As you've reported and others have as well, the Biden administration commissioned the intelligence community about a year ago to do a review of the best evidence available about the origins of the pandemic. And as a result of that review, the intelligence community in the United States came back as split. There are agencies within the intelligence community who believe it was natural in origin, and there are others who believe that a lab leak from the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the most likely source. Now, that is today still an unresolved scientific question. No one has produced convincing evidence of one or the other, although certainly they've got advocates on their both sides who say it is one or the other. But the Biden administration's recent decision to ban funding for this institute suggests that they think that it is still a very plausible theory and that could have been the source of the leak. There's really no other reason why they would make a decision and cite lab safety if they didn't believe that that theory still had credibility. And so this is a very important question that we do need to get to the bottom of, and it would be very helpful if the Chinese government would be more transparent and provide better access to that facility and to the data set that it holds so that the world can understand whether indeed it was this research that has caused this leak or whether indeed it was innocent and natural.
It's not actually clear if any world leaders are even asking Xi Jinping or any Chinese authorities to produce this data. We still don't have the database from the Wuhan Institute of Virology that contains some 22,000 viruses, so the details of those viruses. Do you think this is a question that world leaders should be asking of China?
It would seem strange to me, Shari, that we wouldn't continue to be interested in the origins of this because, unfortunately, it's likely that there will be more pandemics in the future. And whether or not this was natural in origin or a lab accident is consequential in determining the kind of mitigations we should take to reduce the risk of those kind of pandemics breaking out in the future. There are different policy responses that you would make depending on what the actual origin was. And as we all know, this has had profound consequences on the lives of millions, if not billions of people. It has cost many lives. It has impacted severely other lives in relation to the public health measures that had to be taken in response. And of course, the enormous economic cost that the world has borne from this. So the lack of curiosity into getting to the bottom of this question is a concern.
One of the things that you've been asking officials in the Senate inquiry that you run relating to foreign interference through social media apps is about TikTok. Now, there's a new report from the British Foreign Policy Group that shows only 15% of Britons think TikTok should be allowed to continue to operate in the UK. I think that most Australians support TikTok. Most businesses are on it. A lot of politicians are on it. Do you think overall it is safe for regular Australians to be on TikTok, or do you think the fact that its headquarters in China are collecting personal data on individual users means that we shouldn't have this app at all?
I think a lot of Australians are still not familiar with the national security risks of a platform like TikTok. They're not aware of the personal risks that they bear, the data security risks, and also the collective risk that we're all exposed to by having a platform with 6 to 7 million users have access to so many Australians who are increasingly, particularly young Australians, relying on it for news advice. An interesting podcast this week between Malcolm Turnbull and Justin Bassey, the head of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, reflected on this. And Malcolm Turnbull used the analogy that it would be like allowing the Soviet Union to purchase a television licence during the Cold War. You would never allow that in those circumstances. So why should we allow this? I think that's a very good question. I think TikTok still has a lot of questions to answer, including to my committee. I'm looking forward to those answers so that we can make some policy recommendations about how to fix this problem and protect Australians.
Look, that's such an interesting point you raise about the podcast. I didn't think I would have any reason to listen to Malcolm Turnbull's podcast, but now I'm going to have to go and listen to those comments because Justin Bassey, he used to be Maurice Payne, the Foreign Minister's Chief of Staff, and is now the head of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Well, he's a very smart guy and you know, it sounds like he's making some good points there. James Patterson, thank you very much for joining me tonight. And